First one was a little bit wild. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the very exceptional PWS MK111 Mod-1. But before we get into the video, if you want to help me out personally, you can, of course, like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and does help me out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment, thanks, Kevin, in the comment section down below. Because full disclosure on this upper receiver, it was actually provided to me free of cost for testing and evaluation for the last 3 or 4 months now by a kind gentleman named Kevin, who asked if I wanted to try out a PWS upper receiver, and I of course said yes. So I have no relationship with PWS whatsoever. I did not pay for this upper receiver, and unfortunately after this video it will be going back to its original owner. Now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the basics and nomenclature of the PWS MK111. So PWS has several different lines of upper receivers. They have the Pro line of upper receivers, which is kind of their base model. They have the Mod-1, which is what this is, of course, and then they have the Mod-2, which is a little bit more expensive, and it has a little bit nicer rail features, a little lighter, so on and so forth. All of them, at their heart and soul, are a long stroke piston 5.56 or other calibers as well. They also have a 200 series, which is 308 and 6.5 Creedmoor. Haven't really played around with those whatsoever. But basically all of their guns are long stroke piston operated guns with varying levels of accompanying features and barrel length. So the MK111 is the 11.85 inch version. So this barrel, I believe, is a 4150 chrome moly vanadium steel. It is an 11.85 inch barrel, which is a pretty decent barrel length. It's 11.5, 12.5. They're kind of the best do-it-all barrel lengths. I've taken this specific upper receiver out to 500 yards with just a red dot ed magnifier, and it performed very well.
Middle right.
Hit?
Yep, hit. Bring it left a little bit. Middle.
Not that I would recommend taking it out to that distance with M193, at least for consistent first round impacts, but it was definitely doable. Now the barrel twist is 1 in 8, which most people will consider to be the most forgiving accuracy curve. It tends to do the best job of stabilizing a wide variety of standard 5.56 weight bullets. The chambering itself is 223 Wylde, which is a hybrid between 223 and 5.56. Generally speaking, it allows you to accept the higher pressure 5.56 while still retaining some of the accuracy characteristics of 223 Wylde. There's not really a set spec for 223 Wylde, so there is some variation in chamberings. However, we will get into accuracy of this upper receiver, and with certain ammunitions, it performed very well. And again, I was able to take it out to distance without much issue. Now, the barrel profile that they went on the MK111 is a bit of a middleweight profile. It is definitely a little bit thicker towards the rear, which is nice. That's going to give you more rigidity and whatnot. And then towards the end, it has a slight taper down. So it's not like a traditional government or M4 profile barrel. It does tend to keep the weight towards the rear, which for most people is going to balance a little bit better. And again, still retain a good level of accuracy. It works very well, especially when combined with the long stroke gas piston system, to make sure that even though it is heavier, it's still keeping that weight as far back as it can, and overall I think the profile does a good job, especially in its intended application. Now, getting into the main selling point of any PWS upper, the main reason that you're going to be buying one of these is for their long stroke piston operating system, the way that it integrates with the barrel, the upper receiver, and the carrier to create a simple, robust, very well designed, very engineered system that's going to run extremely reliably and extremely cleanly. Whether you're shooting suppressed or unsuppressed, you still get the benefit of a much cleaner running system than a standard DI operating AR-15, which tends to dump a lot of the particulates right into your bolt carrier group, which does, in theory, operate your system. Now, starting out with the long stroke piston operating system, we're going to start with their gas block design and the way that it integrates with the barrel. So from their website, I'm not exactly sure what the material is, whether it's 4140 or some other sort of alloy steel, though again, I would imagine that it is a very high quality steel. It actually has a notch cut into the gas block shoulder that then the gas block slips into so that it integrates steel on steel, so the gas block cannot rotate left or right. In terms of material contact, it's going to be more substantial than a pin, or depending on the pin, of course, you can always get a big, large, substantial pin that takes out a chunk of your barrel. But the way that it integrates into the gas block shoulder itself means that that cannot rotate left or right. Now, that's all well and good, but the way that they've stopped the gas block from moving forward or back, because again, we do have a gas piston slamming back and forth every time you pull the trigger, so that does push a lot of force onto your gas block itself. Now, the way that they've stopped the gas block from moving forward and back is actually threading the barrel and then threading on a locking nut that locks the gas block in place. So it has physical steel on steel contact, preventing it from rotating left or right, and it is actually locked in place via this very substantial locking washer or locking nut that keeps it from moving forward and back. As far as locking a gas block into a barrel, as far as making sure that those two never shift, this is the best setup that I have personally seen, and I would consider this better than the pinned gas blocks, a standard, dimple style or set screw style of gas block that has a pin running through it. I would consider this to be more secure than that. So as far as securing the gas block to your barrel, this is again about as good as I've seen. Now, on top of that, the gas block also doubles as a gas regulator. So up front, we have a 3-position gas regulator, which is actually technically 4 positions because you do have an off position. You have 1, which is your high flow position, 2, which is your middle setting, and then 3 is your lowest setting, basically no gas whatsoever, again, depending on how you're running it. Now, we'll get into how I ran it personally, but you can with 3 gas settings. They are spaced appropriately to be soft when shooting suppressed or unsuppressed, and even with different ammunitions. For instance, through all the footage that I'm throwing in here, you're probably seeing a lot of steel and brass, some of the crappiest ammunition possible. This system with an adjustable gas block is able to run it all and do it smoothly without having to play around too much with your buffer spring setups. Now, on top of a substantially secured gas block and appropriate gas regulator, the piston housing itself is also secured into the steel barrel nut itself. Now, the barrel nut is a very interesting design. So it's actually an angular barrel nut, which would require timing. Fortunately, you're not putting these together yourself. Some, talented technician is hopefully putting these guys together and aligning everything, making sure that it lines up perfectly. The barrel nut is angular, and the interior of the handguard is also angular. So what that means is when these two fit on top of each other, and there is no movement whatsoever between the handguard and the barrel nut, it is a very tight fit. The barrel nut in and of itself acts like an anti-rotation tab. So the piston housing, the barrel nut, the handguard, and the gas block are all interlocked together. So none of those pieces can move without all of them moving together, which means that you have an incredibly strong lockup. Now, on top of that, the lockup methodology on the handguard to the barrel nut is via the 6 steel bolts that again thread into the steel barrel nut itself. And the handguard also does have very small anti-rotation tabs that lock over your upper receiver. Now, talking about the upper receiver very briefly, because there's really nothing special about this one whatsoever. It is basically a, not really mil spec, because they do some special things to it to get it to work with the long stroke piston operating system, but it is basically, for all intents and purposes, a standard 7075 mil spec upper receiver with your forward assist and dust cover. The Mod-2 has a billet upper receiver that I believe is a little bit lighter. It forgoes the forward assist and the Pro version is also a billet upper receiver, I believe, but it's a very, very simplistic one, which is why it's a little bit cheaper. So the Mod-1 uses the most standard looking upper receiver, and it does function very well, just that there's nothing special going on with it. Now, when we get into the long stroke piston operating system, you'll notice that the carrier itself is not locked in place whatsoever. It will fall freely because there are no gas rings in here, because the carrier is not doing the same work that it would be on a normal DI AR-15. Now, one thing about removing the long stroke piston operating system is that sometimes it can be a bit annoying to get in and out, but overall it's just a very slight gripe since you're really not going to be taking it apart all that much. So here we have the long stroke piston. So this actually fits inside of the gas block on your 11.5-inch barrel with the carbine length gas system. The gas flows up through the gas block and is then trapped against this, forcing this to move backwards. Now at the front of the piston, we have a little tappet system. Basically, as this gets pushed forward, these little rings start to let off pressure, therefore slowing down the bolt, or at least making sure that it does not reach the same velocity that it would if those were not present. Now, the long stroke piston system itself is widely regarded as being robust, simple, and reliable, and fortunately here on the PWS it is no different. Now, this is actually two pieces, so if you rotate this, you can actually get the front half off, which will then allow you to get your charging handle off. It should be noted that the Mod-1 comes standard with the Radian Raptor, which is a very nice charging handle. So here we have the carrier and the bolt by itself. Now, the bolt is actually spring-loaded, which in theory will help to reduce bolt bounce. Not really an issue unless you're shooting full auto, and can generally be solved by the right buffer and spring combination, but again, it is something nice. Now, as far as carrier geometry goes, it is not a standard carrier, so it might look kind of standard, but it's definitely not. You actually have this ridge here in the rear where it actually kind of fattens up and gets a little bit bigger. That is to help reduce carrier tilt, because of course, the axis of recoil on this is actually higher than it would be on a standard DI bolt, because on a standard DI bolt, it's pretty much perfectly in the center. As this gets thrown backwards, the whole system moves back. But you got to remember, on a piston system, it actually pushes at the top, so it's actually slightly trying to push the back of the carrier down to remedy that issue from beating up the back of the lower receiver and the buffer tube. They actually make it a little bit thicker back here, so of course it can't push it down anymore because it's already filling up the space as much as it can. There are some other different geometries going on in terms of the contact rails. You actually have some excess material removed, probably to keep it as close as they can to a standard carrier weight. However, this is not a standard carrier weight. This is going to be 2, 3, 4 ounces more than your standard mil-spec carrier weight, which is, I believe, 11.8 ounces. I want to say this is like 13.5 or 14. And again, you also have the entire steel piston operating assembly. So we will get into this, but this is not going to be as soft recoiling, as soft feeling as a DI AR-15, because you have simply more reciprocating mass. And on top of that, the operating cycle starts right here, versus starting all the way back here on a DI, where of course instead of the gas is having to flow all the way back and then into the carrier to then start moving it. Now, the carrier I believe is standard 8620 and the bolt I believe is 9310. They don't really go into any more detail on the website if there's anything special going on here. You have a standard length firing pin. The extractor seems standard 556. I'm not sure if the bolt is interchangeable with other 556 bolts. I haven't tried any other 556 bolts, and I wouldn't recommend that either unless you talk to PWS first. We have a standard cam pin is what it looks like. Now, the gas key itself is fairly interesting because of course, in this, it is a solid gas key. It's not hollowed out because, of course, this is a solid piece of steel on top. Now, the one thing that I will say about this that I have seen done, I guess, slightly better in other piston systems is that they actually have the gas key integrated into the carrier itself, so it's one piece. This is still a two-piece system or a three-piece system because, of course, you have the carrier, the front op rod, or the back op rod, and then the front op rod that connects everything in place. So in the back here, we have two very deeply set screws. These are true grade 8 fasteners, as they should be, and they are staked very interestingly. This is the only staking job that I've ever seen like this. Basically, the rim of the grade 8 screw is actually smashed into the material. And from the looks of it, those are basically impossible to remove. But again, the piston is fastened to the carrier. It's not one piece like I've seen on other piston systems, though nothing about this gives me real pause, and I haven't heard of any issues with it being fastened versus one piece like, again, other piston systems have been. Now, currently for me, this is at about 12 to 1300 rounds of mixed ammunition. So whether that's 55 grain Wolf, Tula, Winchester M193, SDI M193, and then of course a bunch of match loads as well, because we did actually do some real accuracy testing on this upper receiver to see what sort of groups I could get out of it. So starting off with some SDI M193, we actually got a surprisingly good group of 1¼ MOA with just basic ball M193 ammunition. Then we went to some Hornady Black 75 grain SBR. That shot at about 2.5 MOA, though again, it's not necessarily a precision load. Then we went on to some Nosler 77 grain. That also did not shoot particularly well, coming in at around 2.25 MOA. Then moving on to our last and best group of the day, that was some HSM 77 grain Match Kings, and that came in at right at 1 MOA. Moving on to some Atomic 77 grain match ammunition, we were also able to get a group of around 2.5 MOA, nothing special. So what that means for me is that with this specific barrel, with kind of a middleweight profile that's not too heavy, with a long stroke piston system, I should be achieving around 1 to 2 MOA with decent ammunition that it likes. Now, it should be noted that most of the ammunition we were testing was either 55 grain or at the opposite end of the spectrum, 75, 77 grain. This is a 1 in 8 twist, so maybe if I had some more of that ADI 69 grain ammunition, maybe that would have shot right at 1 MOA out of this guy. Not entirely sure, though again, accuracy is going to greatly depend on your skills at getting accuracy out of a gun, your ammunition, your specific barrel combination. So overall, while the accuracy is definitely decent, and again, I was able to take it out to extended distances without issue, the accuracy is good, what I would consider actually to be very good. But if you're looking for something that's going to be 1 MOA with just about every ammunition on the market, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. Now, getting into the actual shooting characteristics of this gun, the actual performance of it, I should say that reliability was 100% flawless. I had zero issues with it whatsoever. The wear and tear on the system, the gunk buildup on the system was very minimal. I have only cleaned and added lubrication once at around the, I want to say about the 400 round mark, and the rest of the time I have just ran it without really caring about it all that much. Now, as you currently see it here, it has an H3 buffer in the back with a standard carbine spring, and I have it on gas position 1. Which for unsuppressed shooting, this will eject M193 at about 3 o'clock, and then steel case ammunition at about 3:30 to 4 o'clock. And that for me is perfectly fine. Now, I also experimented with carbine buffers, and with that, setting 1 was still fine for steel case ammunition, and then I could actually tune the gas down to setting 2 for brass case ammunition for nice M193. Now, if you throw a suppressor into the mix, and depending on your buffer setup, then you might be playing around with gas settings 2 and 1, again, depending on your specific ammunition, buffer, spring setup, and suppressor. Basically, with whatever buffer I had in the back, I was able to get the system running smoothly. Now, it should be stated that this is just the upper receiver. PWS, their lowers come with an H2 buffer, I want to say, in most cases, and that is probably what I would recommend running, is running an H2 or an H1 buffer, again, depending on what ammunition you want to use, and then kind of adjusting from there. Now, with only 3 gas settings, this is not a gamer gun with a long stroke piston system. While this is a smooth shooting gun, we'll get into it in a minute, but this is not the smoothest shooting gun on the market. With a 3-position adjustment, I would get it to where it runs very well, very consistently, unsuppressed at, say, a setting higher, and then suppressed a setting lower, and then kind of stick with that. You're not going to be able to chase the most perfect ejection pattern of, say, 415 with your M193 suppressed, and then expect it to run the same when it's unsuppressed, and you have to change the gas setting out, and now it's not running the way that you want it with all ammunition types. Personally, I would get it into an area where it's good for what you're going to be shooting with it most of the time, so it still has sort of a little bit of headroom in terms of reliability. Now, I know people that own these, that love these, and say that these are the smoothest, best shooting guns that they've ever felt. While that may be true, it can definitely be a very fast, very soft shooting upper receiver. However, it is not going to be as soft as even a well-gassed DI guns. DI guns are well regarded as being about as soft as you can get, especially in a 5.56. Now, how much do you really care about recoil reduction in a 5.56? For most people, I would warrant not much, but for some people, if they are chasing the absolute fastest, lowest recoil impulse, you're still going to be using a DI gun. While this is good, it's smooth, you can look at the slow-mo, and even with an H3 buffer, setting 1 steel case ammunition, it's moving around quite a bit, and I'm pretty good at controlling recoil most of the time. So while it is definitely controllable, it is definitely a smooth, nice feeling gun, don't kid yourself, it is not going to be the smoothest, fastest, flattest gun on the market. That's not what it's designed to do. It is, as the title suggests, one of the best duty uppers out of the box on the market. If I wanted a one and done upper receiver, it would probably be the Mod-1 Mark-114, and then I would pin and weld to a 16-inch and forget about it. And that is exactly who I would recommend this upper receiver for. Basically, if you're looking for an out of the box turnkey solution that will run extremely reliably, extremely cleanly for extended periods of time, and you don't necessarily want to try and build something yourself, because again, this is not something you can build yourself. This is something that uses a lot of proprietary parts, a lot of engineering, a lot of machining goes into this, and you're not going to be able to get something like this by building it yourself unless you own a full CNC shop. Most of us don't do that, and for the money that they're charging for these, which is not too terribly much, I believe the Pros start at about $700 to $800, again, depending on whether or not they're on sale, where you get them from. The Mark 1s are around $1,000, or the Mod 1s, and then the Mod 2 is about $1,200. Personally, if you need a lighter weight upper receiver, then look at the Mod 2. For me, most of the time, for a duty style of upper receiver, I would be looking at either the Pro, honestly, because it does use the same long stroke piston operating system, or the Mod 1, depending on your price range. So at the end of the day, I do think that the PWS Mark-111 is an excellent upper if you're looking for this set of features. If you want a piston gun that's going to run much cleaner in general, but especially suppressed, it's going to cycle just about anything right outside of the box. It is set up extremely robustly so that nothing is ever going to be coming loose on this gun. Now, of course, you don't need to be rushing out to get rid of all of your DI guns. They are still going to be functioning very well. The DI system has been running exceptionally for a very long time, just like the long stroke piston system has. There are pros and cons to both. While this does run very cleanly, when you look at all the additional steel that is put in here, none of that exactly screams lightweight. It does have a little bit more recoil, but again, for those sort of duty-oriented features for that hard use application. And I don't know that you need to look much further than the PWS upper receivers. Now, with all that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think of the Mark-111 Mod 1 or other sort of piston upper receivers that I should be looking at. Personally, I will probably be buying a Mark 114 or 116 to kind of get a different idea for how the different barrel lengths perform. Probably a 14.5 and then pin and weld to a 16-inch, just for my own personal testings, because I would like to get my hands on another one of these to play around with. Maybe a Mod 2, although probably a Pro, just so I can kind of see what the entry level has to offer from PWS and see if it holds up the same as the Mod 1. But with all that out of the way, guys, once again, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.
Low, barely nicked the left edge of the plate. There you go. There we go. You're right about where the bolt comes in. Very bottom towards the left. Up top, almost on the bolt. Bottom middle.
Okay, that's center mass though. I mean, I'm not crazy stable here, so I'm fine with 3 in a row at 400 with the red dot magnifier. Okay, so 5. I'm gonna try the 9 MOA hold, dead. Well, actually, I'm gonna hold right edge.
Alright, give me half a second.
You're good.
it.
Really?
Middle left.
Okay.